My name is Kelly Ryan and I'm one of the reception teachers at Robert Miles Infant School. I'm also the early years leader, and so as part of this I'm responsible for the transition of children into our school from their preschool settings. Firstly, I'd like to offer a very warm welcome to all of our families who will be joining us in September. And having seen the list of names, I know we've got lots of families returning who currently have children in our school or who have had older siblings at our school before. And it's great to know there'll be so many familiar faces. I'd also like to offer a very warm welcome to all of our new families at Robert Miles Infant School. So if you haven't met me before, there is a photo on the screen now so that you can put a face to a name. However, I have to warn you that that photo is quite old. So when you see me, you'll have to imagine it a few years older. So the purpose of this presentation is to give you some information about our school and our early years curriculum, and hopefully to answer some questions you may have. If you do have any questions that are not answered, please make a note of them and we will share details of how to contact the school with any queries towards the end of the presentation. The information we share with you in this presentation aims to give you a feel for our school and how we work in normal circumstances. Robert Miles Infants is a two-form entry school, which means that there are two classes in each year group. Each class is named after a type of tree. So in reception we have Willow class and Maple class. The classrooms are linked by a corridor and an outside area specifically for reception children, which both classes have direct access to. Hopefully you will have already seen the video tour of the classrooms and the outside area on our YouTube channel using the information shared in previous letters. In each reception class we have one teacher and one teaching assistant. Your child will be placed into one of the classes and this will be their classroom base with a named teacher and teaching assistant. However, we work really closely as a team, and so it's very likely that your child will interact with all staff and may be taught by them at some point in the year, such as during phonics groups. Your child will be taught in their classes for most direct teaching sessions. However, during continuous provision sessions, where the children can play and access resources and activities in the different learning bays, they will be able to free flow between the two classrooms and the outside area. Therefore, the two classes may have many opportunities to mix and play together throughout the day. The decision about which class your child is placed in is made after considering many factors, including friendship groupings and boy-girl mix, etc. We have spoken to all the preschool settings about the children, and so once the classes are finalised, we will send information via email or a letter to let you know which class your child is in and who their teacher will be. It's always a really difficult job to sort the classes, but this year it's even more so with not having met the children in person. We won't be able to make any changes to the groupings once they are set, but please know that a lot of thought goes into this based on the information we have about the children at this point. Mrs. Marshall is the teacher in Willow class and she's also the SENCO, which means that she oversees plans and provision for all the children in our school with special educational needs. Mrs. Ryan, that's me, will be teaching in Maple class. There will be a teaching assistant based in each class who will support the children's learning and development. As I mentioned before, we work very closely as a team, and so regardless of which class your child is placed in, they will get to know us all really well throughout the year. We're a very experienced team who have all worked in the early years for a number of years, and we're all parents too, so can place ourselves in your position and know that for many this has been a very anxious time for you and the children. Please rest assured though that we will do everything we can to make the transition process as easy as possible for the children, and that we are happy to help in any way we can. Understandably, children starting big school can be an unsettling time for some children, and parents of course, and so we always aim to get the transition period right so that things run as smoothly as possible in September. We know how valuable the visits to school that we usually do are for helping the children get to know the staff, the setting, and obviously to meet some of the other children who don't currently attend their preschool setting. However, because of the current situation and following the most recent advice from the government, we are unable to go ahead with the transition visit that we had planned for the 7th of July. Instead, in the week beginning the 5th of July, we will be phoning all parents. During the phone call, we will let you know which class your child will be in, so it will be your child's class teacher that phones you, and it will be a chance for us to get to know a bit more about the children, but also for you to ask any specific questions or talk through any concerns you may have. Confirmation of which class your child will be in will be followed up through email or a letter. We have already spoken to all preschool settings as well and use that information, as I've said before, to help us to decide which class the children will be in. The phone calls that we'll be making are likely to be in the afternoon. If for any reason we are unable to reach you, then we will try another afternoon or ask you to contact the school office to arrange a more convenient time to call. In the meantime, what we'd suggest is to try and spend some time with your child looking at some of the videos on our YouTube channel. On there, you will be able to find the video of the tour of the classrooms, as well as many videos of the reception teachers reading stories and sharing experiences with the children in the current and previous Maple and Willow classes whilst they were unable to attend school. I know it's not as good as meeting the teacher in person, but it will help us to become familiar faces. And nearer the children's first day, we will start to upload videos specifically for our new starter children, so please keep checking back to watch them. If you haven't already, please make sure you complete the admissions forms, as this will ensure we are aware of any medical information that hasn't already been passed on by the preschools, as well as making sure we have your most up-to-date contact details. We must have the admissions form as well as a copy of your child's birth certificate before they can start school in September. We also need to make sure we have your contact details to enable us to phone you during the week beginning the 5th of July. So this part of the presentation will give you more information about the early years foundation stage curriculum. In reception, we follow the same early years foundation stage curriculum that preschool settings do. It's a continuation of the framework that they've already been accessing in their current settings. The early years foundation stage, or EYFS for short, runs from birth to 5, and so reception year is the final year of that curriculum. Therefore, just like in preschool, our curriculum at Robert Miles is very play-based, as research shows that this is how young children learn best. There will be more direct teaching sessions, such as daily phonics and maths, but these sessions are fairly short, as we know that many young children find it difficult to concentrate for longer periods of time. The early years is currently going through a period of reform, with a revised framework that becomes statutory for all schools in September 2021. We became early adopters of the revised framework, meaning that we were able to work towards the changes throughout this year and are well prepared to begin the statutory framework in September. The principles and the ethos behind the current and revised framework are broadly similar, and the areas of learning remain the same, although there are some changes within some areas of learning. So in the early years, there are 7 areas of learning. The first 3 are prime areas, and they're extremely important for the children to succeed in the other areas of learning, as well as in later school years. The prime areas of learning are personal, social and emotional development, physical development, and communication and language. The other 4 areas are called the specific areas of learning, which includes literacy, maths, understanding the world, and expressive arts and design. So if we just look at the prime areas in a little bit more detail, the first area of learning is personal, social and emotional development, and that includes self-regulation, so it's supporting and encouraging children to develop their self-control over their own behaviour and emotions, and encouraging them and supporting them with how to deal with upsets, etc. Managing self is about developing independence and perseverance, and it's also about managing their basic hygiene, so things like undressing for PE, using the toilet, making healthy food choices, or beginning to at least, and being aware of the importance of why they need to do that. And building relationships is obviously about making friends and building relationships with the children in their class and other children, but also with the adults in the setting. It's about playing cooperatively with others and supporting the children to show sensitivity to other children's needs. For physical development, it's now into gross motor and fine motor. So within the gross motor, a lot of this will be covered within our PE lessons and our outdoor play, which the children have access to every day. A lot of this will be about negotiating space when moving in different ways, and it's about developing their strength and balance and coordination. For the fine motor, this includes your pencil control and effective grip, which is something that we try and establish with the children quite quickly because it's very difficult to break a bad habit, so we try and get the good habits early on. It's also about beginning to show accuracy and care when drawing and using a small range of tools such as scissors, paintbrushes and cutlery with good control. For communication and language, there are two aspects of learning: listening, attention and understanding, which is obviously about your listening in small and large groups and also in playing with friends, and responding with appropriate comments or questions that demonstrate that they're understanding the conversation that they're taking part in. Speaking will be including in a one-to-one basis, but also in front of smaller and larger groups, and encouraging the children to use new vocabulary that they've come across. Also about expressing their ideas and generally holding a conversation. So here are the 4 specific areas of learning, and the first one, literacy, which higher up in the school we would call English. In early years it's still called literacy, is made up of 3 strands. There's comprehension, word reading and writing. And the comprehension early on, this will be about them understanding conversations initially, but also about stories, what's being read to them, making simple predictions. And then later on, as they develop their reading skills, it will also be about them understanding and demonstrating understanding of what they have read themselves. The word reading is this actual skill of reading. So initially, that would be a lot of that will be about learning the sounds, the phonics side of things, and also learning to read some words by sight, some of the words that can't be sounded out using phonics. It's about reading, by the end of the early years, simple sentences and simple books that are consistent with their phonic knowledge. So that means that using the sounds that they know and applying that within their reading. For writing, obviously we're talking about initially they need to be able to, if they hear a sound, they need to know what that looks like. So writing early on is very much about phonics and encouraging the children to have a go and not be afraid to have a go. So early on it might look like a complete page of squiggles or lots of circles or something. That's completely normal and expected, and actually it's encouraged until they get to the point where they can hear a sound and know what they looks like. We would rather see them doing that than be reluctant to do it at all. Obviously as well, a lot of that will be about learning to write their name, and later on about making spelling choices and writing simple sentences. So maths is into 2 strands, number and numerical patterns, which I appreciate sound quite similar, but maths is quite different under the revised framework. It's got a mastery approach, which actually we've been doing in our school for a couple of years now. And what that means is that rather than going on to bigger and bigger numbers as the children get competent in the thing you've been teaching them, you focus on a much deeper understanding of smaller numbers and how numbers are made up. So for example, rather than if they just being able to count to 10 and order and add small numbers, we would be teaching the children to try and automatically recall those number bonds and understand the composition of numbers, so how they are made up. For example, 5 could be made up of 3 and 2, but it could also be made up of 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1. We will do some work on this with you, so there will be workshops on both the literacy, the phonics side and the maths side at some point in the year, so don't worry if that doesn't make sense yet. It will also be about looking for patterns, verbally counting beyond 20, and also a lot of comparison of number. So being able to recognise number and put them in order is one thing, but actually really understanding what 4 means compared to, for example, 7, using terms such as more than, less than, greater than, etc. So understanding the world, and under that we have past and present, people, culture and communities, and the natural world. So a lot of that is about knowing it's the history side of things, but at an age appropriate level. It's also about understanding about the place that they live in and comparing that to other places in the world. A lot of work on communities and different cultures. And also with the new curriculum, there's a lot more emphasis on map work, which we've begun to introduce with our current reception, and they absolutely love it. The natural world is more your science type things. So exploring plants and animals, making observations about them, understanding simple changes, the seasons and things like that. And then the final one is expressive arts and design, which is more your creative type things. So here we would be teaching the children and developing their ability to safely use and explore a variety of tools and techniques when they're drawing or painting or using the Play-Doh. We would be encouraging them to be creative with what they're doing and to use their own ideas. There's a lot of role play activities in here. So making use of props around the materials to act out stories that they know. There's a lot of expectation about knowing nursery rhymes. So even though they probably come in knowing a lot of them, we would continue that throughout the year. And also about performing songs and rhymes and trying to move in time to the music, which is easier for some children than others. Assessment is a really important part of what we do at school so that we can check the children's current knowledge and understanding and use this to inform our planning and provision. This September, all schools are required to complete a baseline assessment on all children within the first few weeks of them starting reception. Along with some other schools, this is something that we piloted 2 years ago, partly to support national research into the initiative, but also to allow us to try the process and become familiar with it before it's something that we had to do. We also assess the children at various points during the year to check how they are progressing and to support us with early identification of any issues. This enables us to plan a much more effective programme of intervention and to support children to achieve their potential, as well as adapting our curriculum in response to what has come out of the assessments. At the end of the year, the Early Years Foundation Stage Profile is completed for every child in the final term of their reception year. And its main purposes are: 1, to inform you about your child's development so that you know if they're working at the level expected for their age and what they need to do to get there if not. And 2, to make the transition to Year 1 smoother and also help the Year 1 teacher to plan a curriculum that will suit all of the pupils in their class, depending on how they achieved at the end of the foundation stage. There are 17 early learning goals, 1 for each of the aspects of learning shown in the previous curriculum slides, and we assess all children against every early learning goal. So an early learning goal is a statement given for each of those aspects, and it's a statement that we are aiming for by the end of the foundation stage. This is what we're looking for. Information about this will be given to you at the parents' evenings rather than now, and information about how your child is working towards them and what you can do to support at home will also be given at that point. As part of the Early Years Foundation Stage Profile, we also report on the children's progress towards the characteristics of effective teaching and learning. These are shown at the bottom of the page, and they're basically learning behaviours that we aim to develop with the children to support their lifelong learning skills, and shows that we value how children learn as well as what they learn. So a lot of children and parents really want to know what they'll be doing at school all day. The shared timetable in this slide is based on what we normally do, but it is fairly fluid, and with young children obviously we don't always stick to the time so rigidly. This may be slightly different to the timetable given in the welcome booklet and the welcome pack. So the morning activities, as the children come in, we usually have the register and then some sort of morning activity. And what we do at this point will change throughout the year depending on the focus or the need at that point in the year. So early on, this will focus very much on settling the children, obviously, and then routines such as putting their coat away, book bag, water bottle, etc. There'll be a lot of work on speaking and listening. When appropriate, it will also be on name writing and developing their fine motor development. So if a child is struggling to hold pencil, for example, then they're going to struggle to write their name. So prior to that, it might be more that we try and do a lot of work on developing their strength in their fingers through threading, cutting, Play-Doh, etc. And then later on in the year, when the children are ready for it, it might focus a bit more on things like sentence writing or revision of maths that we've done in previous sessions. With maths, there will be some whole class teaching session with the children, working towards a mastery approach, remember, which is about developing a very deep understanding of numbers to 10. And then there will be times when there's follow-up work linked to whatever we've taught in the session. And during that time, there will be small groups working with an adult, while the rest of the children are able to free flow, so choose activities from around the classroom and outdoors when possible. Phonics will happen every day, and that's something that I'll talk to you a bit more on the next slide, but it's where they will be learning the early side of things, so continuing developing their listening skills and their speaking skills, and then learning the letters and sounds, leading on to learning to read and write. Where it says free flow, this is basically where the children can choose from a range of activities and resources both inside and outside. This is also known as continuous provision, and it's a combination of activities set up by the teacher, sometimes linked to a specific learning objective, but also activities the children have initiated themselves. The children are very much encouraged in early years to pursue their own interests and ideas, and this is something we really take into account in our planning. During free flow time, the children may be asked to work with a member of staff on short targeted activities or to read their books, but a lot of that time they will have to choose their learning, supported by the teachers in the class. The focus teaching sessions, this is generally a focus carpet session, and again, sometimes like the maths, followed by group work with an adult, which all children will access. On the timetable, this group work is indicated as a guided task, which can be groups, but it may be individual, depending on the need of the children. And then when they're not working with the adult on that bit, they will again be accessing the play-based activities in their classroom. So it is a very play-based curriculum where children learn through practical hands-on activities with lots of basic skills taught alongside this, such as name writing, phonics, learning letters and sounds, counting, scissor skills, etc. The children also have lots of opportunities to play and learn in our linked outside area throughout the day. And we're very lucky to have so many lovely outdoor learning spaces, I have to say, as part of our school playground, such as a sensory garden, a wildlife area, and we try to make as much use of those areas as we can. Each week there will also be a PE session, which is taught by a trained sports coach. We're really lucky to have this at school, and it's often one of the children's favourite times of the week. Phonics is often a topic that lots of parents have questions about. This is just going to be a very quick introduction to how we teach phonics at Robert Miles Infant School, and there will be a phonics workshop for all reception parents early on in the new term. At Robert Miles Infants, in all year groups, we follow a phonics scheme called Read, Write, Ink by Ruth Miskin. There's a daily session, which at the beginning of the year is very short and focusing on learning the single sounds. Later on in the year, they will be introduced to the term special friends, and that's where you get 2 or more letters that make only one sound. So for example, in the word shop, the S and the H are 2 letters, but it makes one sound, sh. Later on again, they will be put into differentiated groups, so the work can be targeted more specifically to what they need at that point and what their next steps are. And we would also start to incorporate more reading and writing activities alongside this. We offer lots of opportunities for the children to practice and apply what they've learned to give them the best chance of learning and remembering the sounds. So the early focus on sounds and letter correspondence would mean that recognising letters and knowing what sound to say in response, which will support their reading skills, but also when they hear a word, being able to hear the sounds and knowing what letter to write in response, which is their spelling. There's a big focus on teaching the children how to blend the sounds in word to read them, and this just means squashing the sounds together to be able to know what the word says. So for example, if they see the word dog and they knew the sounds, they could sound out d or g,
but then they would need to blend those sounds together, so squash them together to know that that said dog. For spelling, we teach the children to segment the words, which is breaking them up into their separate sounds. Initially, this may mean hearing just the first sound in a word, but eventually they will move on to hearing all the sounds in simple words. So a CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant word such as cat, if they were trying to spell that, we would get them to say the word and then try and hear all the sounds in that word in the right order. K, at. There's also a focus on sight vocabulary and tricky words, and the aim of this is to try and increase the children's fluency. So that may be high frequency words, words that they do come across very often, which will help to make their reading quicker, but also tricky words, words that they cannot sound out using phonics. In Read Write Inc, we call these red words. Now, for example of this would be was. If the children saw the word was and they sounded it out, it would say was, which obviously won't mean anything to them. So therefore we would teach them that that's a red tricky word, we just need to learn that word by sight. There's no expectation that children come to school knowing their letters and sounds. This is something that most children pick up really quickly once they're in school. However, if you are choosing to look at some phonics with your child, some of the key things to remember are the things at the bottom of the slide. So using pure sounds, and this means, for example, in the alphabet, a, b, k, d, e, rather than, for example, a, b, k, d, e. The reason for this is to support the children with their blending. So if they're not using pure sounds in a word like mat, then they would see the word and they might say m, a, t, which would be much harder for the children to blend the sounds together. If they use pure sounds, at, it's much easier for them to squash and blend those sounds together. We also focus very much on the sound that the letter makes and not the name. We may come across the name at points during the year, but the focus is very much on the sound. And equally, lowercase and capital letters. Obviously, we do come across capital letters because of the children's names, but we focus the lowercase first and we make sure that's consolidated. To support the children to be able to blend words to read them later on, there are some things you can do at home to help. For example, everyone knows the I Spy game, but instead of saying I spy and giving a letter name for the children to look around, you might say it in a short, simple word with the separate sounds for children to blend together. So, for example, I spy a, at. If needed, support the children to squash the sounds together to blend them. This is something, the blending bit, that many children find really tricky, and it just needs lots and lots of practice.
We understand completely that communication is one of the most important things to parents, and it's really important to us too. Drop-off and collection times are one of the main ways that we communicate with you and pass on information about the children. And although this hasn't been possible for all classes, even this year and last year we've been able to do this in reception because of where they come in and leave at the end of the day. So this sort of thing is usually about what sort of day they've had, if they've done a particularly good piece of work, or they've been a bit tired, or maybe if they've had an accident or something. And equally in the mornings, this is the time that parents usually pass on quick bits of information to us, such as if someone else will be collecting their child, or if their child's had a bad night's sleep, which all help to make sure we can support the children as much as possible while they're in our care. We also have a text messaging and email service in school where you receive information and reminders from the school office, such as a reminder about Inset Day, or, when we're allowed to invite you into a special assembly to celebrate your child's achievements. General school information is also shared in newsletters and on the school website, and copies of any letters you receive in person will be posted on the website. During the year, we also have parents' evenings where we share more specific information with you about your child, such as how they are settled in initially, but then how they're getting on with their work and what their next steps are. It's also a chance to have a look through the children's work and for you to share any concerns or queries you have. One of the key ways that we'll communicate with you throughout the year is through Tapestry, which is an online learning journey where we save and share photos and examples of the children's work. Parents can also share examples of the children's achievements and experiences at home, and often, especially this year, the children love to share those with the rest of the class. More information about this will be shared with you once the children start school, but for now, the key things are that you will see photos and videos of your child's learning. You will receive email notifications every time a new observation is added and it's linked to your child or the class. If it's an individual observation, you'll be able to reply to our comments and comment yourself. And you can also give permission for other family members to access your child's journal. So if your grandparents, there's a limited number, but grandparents or somebody else that's really important to you that they see what your child's doing, then you can give them permission. If you haven't already, please ensure you complete the forms that should have been in your welcome pack and return them to school as soon as possible so that we can get the child on the system and create a profile ready for September. I'll also add this form to the new starter section on the website just in case. As parents, everyone will have different views on homework and how much should be given, especially in reception. But we don't set weekly homework other than reading. Ideally, the children will read at home with an adult at least 3 times a week. And it really does make a difference to how quickly they progress in reading, and guidance on how you can support the children with this will be given at the Phonics and Early Reading Workshop, which we're planning to do early in the year. We do also send out words for the children to learn to read during the year called speedy words. Learning to read some words by sight, either tricky words that can't be sounded out using phonics or high frequency words that they come across very often, really helps the children to build their reading fluency. One of the most important things that parents can do to help their children is to read a daily bedtime story. Not only does it model the reading early behaviours such as finding the text, talking about the pictures, the illustrations and turning the pages in order, etc. This also is a major factor in developing children's vocabulary and imagination, which has a big impact on their ability to create and write stories later on. At the very least, to be able to come up with their own stories in reception. We will also send out specific tasks at various points in the year, but this won't be weekly. So for example, we send home a leaf template some school holidays with a given focus to find out more about the children's likes or dislikes, experiences from home, which are used to support our knowledge of the children. So if you're wondering if your child is really ready to start school, please don't worry. There are no pre-requirements of what your children should be able to do before they start school. As teachers, we know that children progress and develop at different rates, and we'll support your child with their learning and development from whatever their starting points are. This also includes our summer-born children, who for some are nearly a whole year younger than the oldest child in the class. Please don't worry about that. That's something that we do take into consideration, and we do support the children as needed. However, there are some key things that will help your child when they start school, and they're the things that will help them to become and feel a little bit more independent, such as being able to do their zip. Now we know this is really tricky and it takes a long time to learn. However, it takes a really long time to do up a whole class of zips every time we need to. And so we just ask that this is something you try to practice with them if possible. Of course, we will help them to do it if they can't, but this is the same for getting changed for PE lessons as well. We encourage the children to do as much as they can by themselves, but will help them when needed. For the first half term, they only change into their plimsolls or trainers. There's still plenty of time to work on this. Being able to use the toilet and washing their hands independently is another big one. It's really important, but please don't worry if this is something your child is struggling with. Again, there's still plenty of time to work on this. And so if you have any concerns about this, let us know so that we can work together to support your child. Or alternatively, the local children's centre are always happy to support parents with toilet training their children too. And their contact details are added on the last part of this presentation. If your child has a medical condition, that means they're not yet able to use a toilet independently, it's very likely we already know about this, as information like this is usually passed on to us when we talk to the preschool settings, so don't worry if this is the case. It will help your child to settle more quickly if they are used to sharing toys and resources. This is something they've probably come across at preschool or with older and younger siblings, and it's something we continue to work on with the children throughout their time with us. In terms of what they know coming in. If your child already knows some letters and sounds and can write their name, that's great, but please don't worry if they can't. This is something we work on with them very early in the year and will support them with their next steps from their starting points. If you do choose to practice name writing with your child, please make sure that only the first letter is a capital letter and all of the others are lowercase. Otherwise, they sometimes get confused when we start looking at letters and sounds in phonics. It's also important to make sure they are taught correct letter formation right from the start so that it becomes a habit. If they form their letters from the wrong starting points, they find it very hard to break this habit. I will add some resources to support this to the new starter section of the website. In terms of maths, again, there's no prerequisite, although it helps if children have an interest in numbers and some sort of general number sense. And all this means is that they are beginning to be aware of the value of numbers. So that 3, for example, actually means something to them in terms of how much, rather than just something they've seen or heard. This is something we work on a lot in reception, particularly when they first start school. But finding real-life opportunities to count and use numbers will really help them. For example, counting out the right number of forks for dinner or counting steps as you go up and down them. Well, finally, here are some contact details which you may find useful. So at the top, we've got the school address, phone number, and the office email address. And if you do have any questions or queries that you feel weren't answered as part of any of the presentations, then please feel free to contact us. We will, of course, be phoning all parents at some point between now and the end of this academic year. So you might want to save the questions for then, and it might be easier to talk in person, but also please feel free, if you would like to email them in instead. If it's something quite specific to you and your child, then we will contact you and get back to you personally. Whereas if it's something that we find a lot of parents are wanting to know the answer to, we will send out something a bit more generically. It might be something that we put information to on our school website under the new starter page. So do keep checking there, because whenever we send any communication out, we always post it on there as well. So you won't miss anything that way. The contact details at the bottom are for S&A uniforms, which you should have had, hopefully, in your packs, and also the Children's Centre. So if there are any things that you're worried about to do with your child, it doesn't have to be to do with starting school, but it might be something about a sleeping issue or a toileting issue, please feel free to contact the Children's Centre. And if they can't help you, they usually know who can. Thank you so much to everybody for listening to our presentation. And we are really, really looking forward to meeting all the lovely children coming to school at Robert Miles in September.